Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Ross Rich, and today we have a very, very special guest with us today. We have Stevie Case. You might know her as the CRO of Vanta, partner at 20 Sales, and just legendary sales leader. So thank you so much for being here today, Stevie.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, before we dive in, it's like you've read my mind in terms of your top three strategies for driving excellence in execution, but a bit about yourself and how you found your way into revenue leadership.
Oh my goodness. In a very non-traditional way, I am 2.5 years into the journey at Vanta as Chief Revenue Officer. Before this, I was 6 years at Twilio. I got to go on the journey from basically no sales team to a huge 1,000 person plus global revenue organization. I was leading a large enterprise team and then the mid-market business there. Before that, spent several years selling really technical sales and payment platforms, financial services. But before that, I had a quite unique journey. I once upon a time was in college at the University of Kansas studying to be a lawyer.
Hmm.
I got very hooked on a video game called Quake. And I ended up taking an unanticipated detour as the world's first female pro gamer playing Quake professionally.
Wow. I did not know that. This is a great bomb to drop on us.
Yeah, this is my like weird random backstory. And it sort of took me down this path that led me towards playing games and then making games professionally. And ultimately, that led me into software. So I was then in tech, even if I didn't really realize it at the time. And I ended up in LA at Warner Brothers making mobile games. And I had a vendor
Hmm.
who was just like a great partner, great vendor. I bought technology from him. His name is Matt Golden. And he approached me one day. I was in like a product manager role. And he said, I need a junior salesperson. I think I can teach you to sell. What do you think? Like, come on over. And I was very deeply shy and awkward, had never even remotely thought about sales or revenue as a career, didn't even know what that meant or looked like. But Matt was very charismatic. He was going to teach me, and I've always been big on leaning into discomfort. So
Hmm.
I said yes, went on the journey, and I have been in revenue ever since.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked with that one. Sometimes you get kind of the usual answer, but that's a new one. So we could have had Stevie Case, the case law lawyer. We could have
That's
had
exactly.
we could have had the gamer. Honestly, that sounds like it would have won you a lot of rapport and cachet selling to very technical stakeholders. I'm like, that's probably a good one to have up your sleeve when you're selling to some engineers or developers. And then Vanta, which is very different. Understanding we're very happy customers at Accord of Vanta, but yeah, very different sales motion. It sounds like from even your previous experiences. So very cool to hear, just leaning into new situations. And I think the best leaders are very horizontal thinkers and can use what you learn from law school to playing games to early sales Jedi to what you're doing now. So that's really cool to hear.
Thank you. Yeah, I have always thought it's my specialty is really the breadth. It is that I can go very, very deep to very wide,
Mhm.
and I like to be able to have that like understanding of everything from the technology to the human aspect of sales. It's part of what I find really compelling. I think of it as this very complex puzzle to put together where you're piecing together feelings and humanity with technology, with math. Like it's the great combination of everything. It's part of what I love about it.
Totally. And just because I'm really curious, not that it has much to do with the topics today in terms of execution excellence, but I'm sure other people out there might be curious as well. What did you learn from gaming that might have tied over to a role as a seller or a sales leader?
Yeah, actually a lot. It's
Okay, I'm glad I asked then.
truly like deeply the same job deep down because really as a CRO, even as an AE, you own a book of business. Your job is to drive specific metrics and a deep fundamental understanding of how to win is at the
Hmm.
core of the job. This is an incredibly competitive job. I
Yes.
am extremely competitive. Done the Strengths Finder, number one category is competition. Like I thrive in a competitive environment. So deeply understanding and inspecting how to win, how to move certain numbers, how to allocate resources in an
Hmm.
effort to be victorious. Like these things are all actually very common between gaming and the job I do today. So there's a lot more similarity there than you might expect.
Okay, well, that's a perfect tie-in that I obviously thought of before to the topics we're going to talk about today. We asked you for your key three strategies around driving execution excellence, and I absolutely love these. Maybe to start with an overview, I'll just read over what they are, and then we can start with the first one here. But we're going to talk about don't expect what you don't inspect and how to drive operational rigor. Absolutely love it. Make it easier for people on your team to be successful when you can actually share what good looks like. When it's everyone's job, it's no one's job. How do you have clear lines of ownership? And then the third, create a culture that is always asking, what do I have control over? And again, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people love going to sales, especially competitive folks, you get to own your business as a seller. And we'll talk more about that. But where should we start? Which one of those three? Should we start at the top or anyone that
Let's
you
start at the top.
okay, let's do
Operational
it.
rigor is the foundation of everything.
And so what does that mean to you? Because I know obviously there's so many things we could talk about inspecting and weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual cadences when it comes to operations. Um, what do you think are most important when you think about how do you share what great looks like and what you should expect from your team and ways that make inspection maybe feel less um, like a dirty word and more something that actually helps your team succeed?
Yeah, I think at the heart of this idea, really when you're building a revenue team, what you're trying to build is a learning machine and an organization that understands how to peel apart the layers, how to deeply inspect data and identify patterns and trends. And you need to be looking for things that might be positive trends or negative trends.
Mhm.
And there are a couple of things that go into making that truly great. When you're building a great rock solid forecast cadence, you want it to be reliable, consistent, and ever evolving. And what that looks like on a weekly basis is pulling people together on a regular cadence and creating a place where the expectation is not perfection, it is not performance, it is accuracy
Hmm.
and it is questioning. So my goal when I pull people together, whether it's in a forecast call or for a deal inspection or whatever it may be, I don't expect them to have every answer. I don't expect a perfect buttoned up package. What I'm looking for is thoughtful, detailed answers that expose both the weaknesses and the strengths of the forecast or the deal.
Mhm.
So we want to talk about what we don't know. We want to talk about what's going wrong or what could go wrong. We want to talk about risk. And then we also want to talk about opportunity because the ideal scenario is that you've created a structure that runs on a regular basis where everyone feels comfortable enough to be vulnerable and expose those details because when you do, then you can action them. In an
Mhm.
ideal world, you've created a team and a structure where that's happening every single week. Everybody's doing it together. And then you're taking action on those opportunities and risks and getting better week over week over week. If you build that machine, it is really hard to lose because your machine will continue to improve, revenue will continue to increase, and you'll always uncover the next thing, whether that thing is good and you can double down on it, or that thing needs to be addressed because it's a real risk to the business.
Totally. And I think the challenge from previous roles and talking to the leaders that I've heard is how do you strike the balance between driving that accountability, the rigor, the inspection,
Yeah.
and creating that openness and that ability to share the things that aren't going well and not necessarily having to seem like I got everything squared away. I can bring this imperfection, and we can work together to a better outcome, right? I think that's really hard is how can you sometimes be the bad guy? Um, because that's where the genius comes from, right? Is the friction in a
Yep.
positive way. So I'm curious to hear how you've kind of thought about that over your career. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what do you reward and what do you punish? There does have to, the thing has to contain both carrot and stick. So,
Yes.
the key is not just rewarding outcomes. If you're always just rewarding the outcome, you're ignoring the process that got to the outcome. And a rock solid operational cadence and this level of rigor, it's actually more about how you do the thing and the why behind it than it is the actual outcome. The
Mhm.
outcome happens. your job when you're creating this kind of cadence is to create the processes that will make sure the outcome continues to happen. So, the day-to-day example of that would be when I'm running a forecast, and my leaders are presenting to me, the things that are likely to get a negative response will be um, really more about how they've run their inspection or things they can control. So, if I get a leader telling me, like, well, we just haven't really thought about that. Or like, the great example from recent times, one of my leaders saying, well, we have a bunch of people out on PTO, so we're going to miss our number.
Hmm.
Like, well, did you know that was coming? Did you think about it? And a good answer would sound like, we knew about it. Here's the plan we made. Here's what I have control over and what I'm going to do about it going forward. A bad answer would be, well, that's really out of my hands. People take PTO. What are you going to do?
Yeah, we'll try to make up for it the month after, 2 months after.
Yeah,
But yeah, this one was just a really tough one.
yeah,
Easy.
yeah. All I'm looking for is that you know the weakness and you have a plan to address it and you understand why it matters. So for me as a leader, I'm looking to reward the person who has the plan and knows they have an issue and they're going to address it. And I'm not going to be nearly as hard on them, even if there's an issue, even if there's a miss, because they get it and they know what to do about it. So think it's about that. I've also
Mhm.
seen it go wrong on the other side when you've got a top performer who maybe has real issues with how they run deals, but they're succeeding because of either luck or like what I like to call a party trick, some kind of cheap way that they seem to win that's working today but won't work durably in the future.
Mhm.
So many people will reward that top performer and that outcome because they're at the top of the leaderboard. What's critical is you get to the heart of what they're doing every day and you help them continue to evolve. Because if you don't inspect what they're doing and how they're getting there, it's not going to last forever. You're not doing them favors and it's not a durable success pattern.
Totally. And last piece here before we move on to number two, how do you share what you expect, right? So we talked a lot about the inspection part before going into the carrot, the stick, the what you reward, etc. When someone comes onto your team, whether it's an AE or a manager or director, how do you think about setting what great looks like for them so they can understand what they're marching towards? Yeah, curious to hear how you think about that.
Yeah, I think this comes down to a combination of things. Like you got to have all the basics of like a clear written playbooks, clear set of dashboards. I'm a big believer that people really deeply need to understand the key metrics that matter in the business, whether they are metrics that they are personally responsible for or they're just contributing to. That's all table stakes.
Hmm.
From there, I deeply believe it's about showing, and that as a leader, your job is not just to be the person on the top of the org looking down and criticizing. It's about modeling what really matters. So, what I aspire to do and try to do is be vulnerable in showing the ways that I am trying to achieve what I'm trying to achieve, the ways I
Hmm.
inspect the business, the way I like to see deals run. I try to be vulnerable when I've made mistakes in that as well.
Hmm.
And by modeling that for the team, my hope is to show them how to run their businesses.
Yeah.
And as we've grown at Vanta, our team now, we have a quite a large team. We've got roughly 70 quota carriers globally now. When I arrived at Vanta a couple of years ago, we had about 20. So we've had a lot of growth. We've added geographies. We've added multiple layers of management.
Hmm.
So what I've tried to do is model the type of deal inspection that I want, for example, and then those leaders learn it, and then they are able to replicate it with the next layer that they've brought in of
Hmm.
leadership, and then they model it for their ICs. And it's like if you can show by doing, I find that's much more effective, and it comes across as much more credible if you can actually model the behavior yourself.
Yeah, you got to lead from the front and can't ask people to do what you're not willing to do yourself, which I think a lot of people sometimes forget. But no, appreciate that. I think that's a great lens into how you think about the operational rigor piece. Semi-related, number two is when it's everyone's job, it's no one's job. And how do you create clear lines of ownership and reward? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things going on within this idea. Um, One, I would say in especially early stage companies, I think that many founders, many early stage leaders fall prey to the idea that like comp plans don't really matter and people are just going to do what's right for the business. And I just think that's fundamentally naive. And,
Mhm.
ultimately, when you hire people to drive revenue, the compensation plan you give them is going to drive their behavior. It's going to be the thing that explains to them what matters to the business, and they will abide by what you incentivize them to do. So,
Mhm.
making that extremely clear and aligning it with what you want from them will get the best results. And thinking that people should just like do the right thing for the business because it's logical or the right thing, it just doesn't work that way. If you get
Agreed.
someone who will both hit your comp plan and do that, you've got like an A triple plus player, and that's amazing. But you should not build a business that way. You got to make it clear. The other aspect of this is that I have really found as organizations grow, you get into this territory of messiness where you're asking people in your revenue org to do multiple things, sometimes dozens of things.
Mhm.
That rarely works. When you've got like a bunch of people responsible for a metric or a project or an initiative, you are extremely unlikely to get a good outcome because everybody's going to go to their easiest project, their highest priority, and the thing everybody owns simply will not get done successfully. I've seen leaders just like throw their hands up, be like, why are we not making progress on this thing? It's like, well, it's not really clear who owns the outcome.
Yeah.
So, one thing I've seen as you grow an organization is it's critical that if you want something to get done, if something matters in your business, you need somebody who is thinking about it 24/7 and thinking about very little else. Create those clear lines of ownership, set up the right incentives, and things can change overnight if you get those things right.
That's a great reminder. And I think even thinking about Accord and other high growth companies that I've been at in the past is those things change so quickly in terms of what is the most important thing can change really quickly. And it sometimes takes the structure of the company to catch up to that and what really matters from the front lines. And that's a great reminder. And also the type of people you might have at a company that's a seed or series A company and the types of people that might be excited to be there and understand the entrepreneurial nature and have that intuition to very quickly the types of people that are fantastic for a series B, C, D company, and how much more directive you need to be and how much more clear lines they need to be. So that's a great reminder for myself and hopefully other people out there that are listening in.
Well, I think there's so much you can do here too, dependent on the personas of folks you've got. I think there's this like conventional wisdom that the team you had at seed or series A like can't survive to later in the business. And I do not believe that. I think you just have to think differently about what those folks' roles are, how
Yeah.
you put them to their best and highest use. We have an incredible shared friend, Eric Martin, here at Vanta, who was Vanta's first head of sales, just unbelievably talented. The company would not exist as it does if not for Emart, as we call him. And, Emart's role has evolved 10 times over in the company. He is incredibly entrepreneurial. He's a builder. One of my folks recently called him our machete man. You send him out into the jungle and he like cuts the path open for you and like figures out where to go. And he has become like our internal builder. So now, if I've got an initiative that's like stuck or struggling, or it's like not clear what the path is, I assign it to Emart and he goes and he machetes the path and like stuff happens. And he has like found a way to be like an inside entrepreneur at
Mhm.
a much larger company. So I think it's really about that and like finding the places where people can do their best work inside the org as it changes.
Yeah, it's a great reminder. I think it sounds like the way you run the business and manage people changes, not necessarily that people aren't great fits. And I think a lot of people lose fantastic early hires that are super entrepreneurial. I can think back to my days of the people that grew out of Stripe as it got more structured and larger, where those people could have contributed for years ahead. Um, but it just wasn't maybe run in the way that had roles for them. So that's a great reminder. Yeah, shout out Emart. The last piece we're going to talk about, kind of something more broad, is creating a culture around thinking about what do I have control over. And as I was sharing, I think this is like one of the main reasons of why I went into sales as kind of an entrepreneur-minded person. I think the top performers typically take ownership over their number and their business completely, and they build great relationships with the customers and maintain those over years, and are consistently top performers. So, what do you look for folks that think about this kind of control as
Mhm.
kind of an attitude and frame of mind as a seller?
Yeah, to me, this is everything in every role in a revenue org. I am
Mm,
always looking for folks like this who have this grit and this entrepreneurial mindset. It's also part of what I love about sales and about revenue generally is you can really be the master of your own destiny.
mhm,
And the truly great players always are here. So, I am seeking to create a culture where everybody on my team feels like a GM of their business. They are high ownership. They are driving the outcomes. And for me, this has been a journey to, like, I've always been like a high agency, high ownership person. But I had a really interesting, tough moment with one of my mentors in my last role when I was at Twilio. I was running this huge team, and we had the plan for the year, and the team was really frustrated. Like, we weren't getting enough inbound leads. And we went to QBR, and I'm presenting, and my COO, George who had been the COO at Salesforce, like, incredible guy, very, very senior. And I had written this great, thoughtful doc, and I was like so proud of myself because I delivered all these insights and I showed in data, like, marketing's not driving enough leads. And I'm like, George, like, what are you going to do? And, God, this is such an idiot. George says to me, like, okay, I hear you. What do you have control over? Like, what can you, like, yeah, we're going to work on more leads. That's great. Like, this is always a thing. What can you do?
mhm.
And I just paused and I'm like, oh, it was like this mental reset for me of like, oh, right, of course, yes. Beyond complaining, the thing I can do is like, well, I can drive outbound. It's like, yes, go do it. Great. Okay. So I stopped complaining and I went back to my team. It's like, okay, we got to go outbound. Like, let's figure it out. And
Mhm.
we went back and we took a team that initially was basically 100% inbound. And over the course of about 18 months, brought it to a team that was doing over 80% outbound pipeline.
Wow.
And just like, yeah, it was like a total cultural shift, like a mindset shift. And it all came back to this idea that in every situation, things are going to go wrong. There are going to be things not delivering. You're going to have stuff that you don't have control over. But if you come back to this central question of what can I control? What can I do in this situation to create my own success? There is always something. There is always an answer.
Mhm.
And I'm looking to build a team where every individual asks that question for themselves and for their team and for their business. Because if you do that, you're always going to get better outcomes. You'll be at the top of the leaderboard. You'll drive that outcome for the number. And it's really not hard. It's just a choice. It's a choice to focus on your controllables. We talked a lot this year at Vanta at the beginning of the year of controlling your controllables. Always come back to that.
Mhm.
And it's honestly the easiest thing you can do to make sure you always come out on top.
Totally. And I think the best leaders, entrepreneurs, et cetera, have this mindset. How do you help instill that at the frontline level, right?
Yeah.
So, you're in this scenario, Twilio, okay, we need to do this to hit our number or get close to it. How do you think about translating the mindset that you have to folks that it might not just come as organic to? Like, I know there's not a silver bullet for it, but yeah, what are some tips and tricks that you might have for other leaders out there to drive this idea of agency and ownership across your field?
Yeah, I do think you've got to really emphasize the why behind it. It can't just be like something you dictate from on high. You've got to come with the, like, why does this matter? And I think you've got to bring that why at multiple levels. So it's got to be everything from why does it matter to you, the individual salesperson? And,
Mhm.
for outbounding, those answers should be very clear, but I think it's important you both articulate them and back them up with data to say, if you outbound, here's what we see happens.
Mhm.
Our top performers outbound, here's what they generate, here's what it does for their results, here's been the impact on their life. They went to club, they took their partner to club with them, they were able to get like this huge W-2. They had great personal outcomes.
Yeah.
You can
And
talk
skills,
to
I guess, too, to grow, right? When you
totally.
take that over.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
developing it, like help them develop in their career. It took them to greater places. So there's the personal piece. And then there's also contextualizing it for the business about why it matters. So from an ownership perspective and driving success in your role, It's like, here's why as a business it matters we develop an outbound muscle, and here's how it might help you move into a management role. And, I think that bigger picture has to be a part of it. It then is up to the individual to take that and run with it, but
Yeah,
then you've set the bar, and then it's all about setting clear goals. You've got to set clear expectations, put a flag in the sand, and ask people to run at it. And when they do, you reward them. And when they don't, they might not belong on the team anymore.
totally. Definitely easier said than done. But yeah, really cool to hear how you think about this stuff. Building a culture around controlling your own destiny, making sure there's clear lines of ownership, and yeah, don't expect what you can't inspect. All great lessons. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom? I think maybe as someone that's had a super interesting career and worked their way to a CRO role at one of the best companies in the world, any advice you would have for folks on that journey of sales leadership, lessons and things that you've picked up?
Yeah, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I received in the past and that I would give to folks who aspire to continue to move up in revenue organizations is really try to develop understanding and empathy for your boss's job. That one of the most powerful things you can do is look at the person you're working for and try to deeply understand, how are they incentivized? What problems are they trying to solve? Why are they doing what they're doing? And how can you participate in to helping them do those things?
Hmm.
If you can deeply understand the problems, the metrics, and the tactics one level above you, you can prove that you've basically started doing the job before you're in it, and you will be rewarded with advancement. So develop that empathy, get really curious, ask questions, and seek to operate at the next level before you actually are in the seat. The second piece of advice I would give is that this is fundamentally a human endeavor. People really matter. Relationships matter. You know, the technology is foundational. It's all great, but ultimately, people buy from people. Be thoughtful about the way that you work with your team, you work with your stakeholders, be respectful, be transparent, be ethical, and you are so much more likely to succeed. And it's going to feel a hell of a lot better along the way.
Totally. That's a great reminder. Both of them, I guess, approach your job as you do a customer. If you're a top seller, and this is something that I definitely did not think about early in my career. I thought about my customers and my prospects are, on a pedestal. And I'm like, help me figure out and navigate internally, how to make them successful versus, okay, how do I support my boss and my boss's boss as much as I'm supporting my customers? But I think that's a great reminder for folks out there.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, Stevie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to share some lessons learned and some ideas around how to drive better execution out there as a leader, a manager, and a seller. And this was super informative.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Okay, thank you.